Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on modernizing with OpenShift Virtualization. It's a journey beyond cost savings. My name is Ross Beard. I'm with Shadowsoft. We are a leading provider of IT automation, app platform modernization, and observability solutions. And today, I'm going to be kicking off the conversation, sharing some research into how customers are dealing with this VMware Broadcom deal. I'm going to speak through some themes that we've uncovered and then talk about the modernization opportunity at hand. Next, I will be passing the mic to Derek Sutherland, who is the Senior Director of Technical Services at Shadowsoft, who will introduce OpenShift Virtualization and talk through the modernization journey with the tooling. We will wrap up the session with a roundtable discussion. We'll be bringing in Steve Stewart, our VP of Sales at Shadowsoft, to share some insights he's hearing from customers. Derek will be on the panel, and we'll also have Christian from Red Hat, who is a solution architect and can shed light into what he's seeing in the market. So a little bit about us. Shadowsoft, we've been a Red Hat partner for 15 years. We've been helping customers on their modernization journey, providing services from strategic planning to design and architecture, deployment, development, and embedded staff. We are headquartered in Atlanta in the US. Our team of 40 people includes 20 engineers with 50 plus certifications, and we primarily work with mid-sized enterprises, really supporting them on their modernization journey. So I wanted to take a step back and just share a little bit about how we approached this research to really shed sort of light into how customers are dealing with this problem. So we set out and we wanted to ask enterprises, and particularly IT directors at these enterprises, what's worrying them about the situation? How big of a priority is this for them right now? How significant are the price increases? What have they been doing, or what are they planning? What options are they considering? And then as they're looking to modernize, are they modernizing off VMware, and where are they going? So we interviewed 15 enterprises across multiple industries. And we primarily spoke to the IT directors who had the budget over the virtualization, or they had significant influence over the decision making. Now, we are a Red Hat partner, award-winning Red Hat partner, but we left our Red Hat bias at the door because we're really seeking to understand how these directors and enterprises are navigating this challenge. So over the next couple of slides, I'm going to share these themes. It's going to really lead into our recommendations and our point of view as we're speaking with customers. And then Derek will take over and talk through OpenShift Virtualization as one of the options that customers are looking at. So theme number one, uncertainty. There's been a lot of uncertainty around the product development. Broadcom's track record of reducing investment in their acquisitions tells a really concerning story. So there's a perception that Broadcom will milk this business for as much as it can with as little investment as possible. So as we spoke to IT directors, that worries them. They don't want to be investing in a platform that is not going to be improving into the future. There's also uncertainty around the support. It's unclear what changes Broadcom will make to the support, and particularly around changes to the SLAs. They cannot rely and trust a platform if they're not going to get the response times that they need, or that they will require into the future. And uncertainty around pricing, and this has really moved into anger and frustration around the pricing, with increases we're hearing 3, 4, 5x. And then into the long term, it's difficult to trust the pricing at, say, a renewal in 3 years' time. The enterprises we spoke to are really nervous around how they can forecast into the future if they've already been sort of shocked by this latest announcement. So the second theme is decision-making criteria. As we spoke to these enterprises, they're assessing their internal skills and technology investments. What type of skills and accompanying training would be required if they were to move from VMware to another platform? We heard from Microsoft shops who are looking at Hyper-V as a quick fix. And we talked to Red Hat shops who are looking at OpenShift and Red Hat solutions. They're also reviewing their modernization roadmap to see what can be brought forward. Can any teams accelerate the modernization initiatives, moving their VMs to the cloud or moving them over to containers? And lastly, they're planning 5-10 years out, and they really want to avoid the vendor lock-in. This was really interesting because some are really concerned around this and trying to mitigate the risk that they're hedging their bets. They're looking at placing some workloads in one platform and some in another because they're worried that whatever bet they play, whatever they move to might be an acquisition target in the future, and they'll wind up being in the same situation they are right now. Moving on to the theme 3 is who's getting impacted. The VM admins who are managing these VMs are going to need to reskill if the enterprise moves to another platform. These people are going to find it difficult if the new platform is not easy to use. We heard from IT directors that their infrastructure strategy is turned upside down. They are being asked to pay 3x more than what they budgeted. And that's leading to some tough conversations with the CFO. In one particular case, I heard from one lady who said that she is not bringing any VMware renewal quote to her CFO that is 3x. She would get laughed out of the room. So she's looking at other alternatives. So when she's bracing for that conversation, she's got some other options up her sleeve. Speaking of the CFOs, they're in the business of reducing costs, not adding to costs. So they're taking a pragmatic approach to this, and they're looking at other options, and they're looking to their teams to bring other options to the table. So it's not just us that has found this research or has done some research. Forrester is predicting that 20% of the market will begin their escape away from VMware in 2024. So for us, we really believe as an industry, we're reaching a fork in the road. There's never been a better time to get support for your modernization initiatives. Right now, there's an opportunity to capitalize on this uncertainty, on the cost increases around VMware. And as we're speaking to customers, they're weighing up their two options. On one hand, they're maintaining the status quo with VMware, or they're migrating to what we might say is a worse version of VMware to make sure they're not paying more, or they're seizing the opportunity to get their modernization initiatives approved. So what's at stake? Really, as we're speaking to customers, we're asking them a number of questions. What happens in 2 years' time when a competitor introduces some new functionality and you can't respond quickly? What happens in 3 years' time when VMware ups their price 3x again? And what happens in 5 years' time when you can't hire top-tier talent because they don't want to work on VMware? So taking all that, we're working with customers on seizing the opportunity, and we've got a 3-phased approach to support customers on that journey. Phase 1 is determining what's really important to your company. Is it just cost? If it's cost, then you may be able to find a VMware alternative for around that same cost. But keep in mind the retooling, the reskilling costs that may be hidden. Make sure that you account for those. Is it business continuity? Do you want to avoid any disruptions? Do you want to mitigate risk moving forward? Or is it flexibility? Do you want the ability to move these workloads in the future and not be tied or chained to one platform? Is it agility and speed? Do you want to move quickly? Do you want to keep up with the competitors, respond quickly, serve your business leaders? Or is it operational efficiency? Are you being asked to do more with less? Is the business growing and they're asking you to do more, but the IT team is not growing? Are you looking to drive automation around your infrastructure? Or is it about sticking it to Broadcom? Through our research, we heard a lot of frustration and anger. And what we want to do is just wave the warning flag. Do not make any rash calls and decisions now that you will regret in 3 to 5 years' time. Work with a partner, evaluate your options, and think 3-5 years down the road, where do you want to be? So phase two involves assessing your workloads and your options. Understand the complexity of your environment. How intertwined are you with the VMware suite? It's one thing to have vSphere, it's another thing to have Cloud Foundation. Know the opportunities and risks when moving the workloads. What will you gain and what will you lose? And avoid migrating older complex workloads or those that are impacting business continuity, like an Oracle database. Next, research your options. There are a lot of different options available: Red Hat, Hyper-V, Proxmox, Nutanix, or the cloud providers. But understand the trade-offs. Some options are just a crude bandage to your problem. If you're going to invest the time, the money, the resources to move off the platform onto a new platform, do you really want to be moving to another legacy virtualization platform? Or do you want to be moving to a platform that is built for the future with modern tooling that can help you modernize and move into other technologies and toolings like containers into the future? And that's the question we're really posing to customers and encouraging them to think through their plans for 3 to 5 years' time. And realize this move is not going to happen overnight. You're not going to move 100% of your workloads overnight. Treat this as a marathon, not a sprint. Start by targeting 20% of your existing workloads. Identify the low-risk workloads that can provide great opportunities to start the retooling, start the reskilling, build that internal advocacy so that you can then look towards bringing more teams and more leaders on board with this transformation or modernization. The third phase is really around retooling and reskilling. So when it comes to retooling, adopt a modern technology stack that can be used for VMs and containers. Build on your team's existing knowledge of any of their modern technology stacks that they already know so you can streamline that transition process. And look to utilize open source tools that give you that flexibility into the future. On the reskilling side, we're seeing customers and we're advising customers to assess their current skills and identify any gaps, implement some targeted training on those new skills and processes, and then prepare the team to manage both the VMs that you're moving over and containers. So this is important to highlight as you're reskilling your team members to manage VMs in a new modern way. Help them understand that the tools and the processes and how they're doing it is also going to be able to be applied to containers. So as your company and they are being asked to manage containers into the future, they're already going to have the skills. So that's a real interesting, compelling point to consider as you're bringing the team along for the journey. So at Shadowsoft, we're in the business of helping enterprises modernize at their own pace, so we can support you across these different phases. There are some links in the sidebar here to a lot of additional resources that you can dig into to learn a bit more about how we can help. But on that note, I am going to pass it over to Derek to really highlight one of the options that we are recommending to customers, and that is Red Hat OpenShift Virtualization. So take it away, Derek.
Cool. You guys hear me okay? All right. So something I want to make sure that we address before we even dig into the OpenShift virtualization piece that Ross talked about, but it was glanced over a little bit, is many of the customers that we interviewed were considering, at least initially, full bore migration to something different. Everyone had this stark reaction to Broadcom buying VMware. We want to make that big shift, right? The reality started to set in when they started coming in just from a cost modeling perspective and going, initially, yes, that looks like this would be a panacea. Going to a different solution might be cheaper. And as Ross said, when they started looking at more the nitty gritty of it all, the actual migration cost, the replatforming costs, etc., it ends up many times being the same, slightly more, maybe slightly less. But the juice when it becomes going from an original, VMware-like solution to something that Ross mentioned is a crude bandage, like a Hyper-V or a Proxmox, something that is a fundamentally doing the same thing, but just doing it through a different interface, doing it using slightly different technology, just quite isn't worth the squeeze, right? Because the benefit really, if you're doing that, is just to replatform for replatforming's sakes, because you're sticking it to VMware for the price differences, right? So a lot of customers started shifting and started considering, what are our other options? And that's where OpenShift virtualization comes in for one particular keen reason, and that's managing your VMs and containers are done in the same platform using the same tools and the same technology. So getting in front of that curve of modernization is really important, and it's the reason why we're leaning customers this way. We'll talk about that more as we go throughout, but I just wanted to make sure we emphasize here that portion, as well as it doesn't have to be full bore out the gate. And in fact, many times we recommend customers do this in slews, where they're bringing part of their workloads over and then migrating more as time goes on as part of that modernization strategy. So why Red Hat virtualization? Again, this leans into that. The big thing here is it's not a traditional virtualization solution. And some people might look at that and go, that's a negative, but we actually see that as an extreme positive, right? If it were just another version of KVM or another version of ESXi that was out in the wild, in this case, it's KVM based, there wouldn't be a lot of benefit from going here other than to hopefully save cost in the future and not get embedded in something new. The benefit starts to become with the consistent management across both type of workloads, right? So again, we're talking containers and virtual machines, many of which some customers might have started tiptoeing into containers. We might have started playing with Kubernetes and OpenShift. Maybe they started going that direction. But many, quite frankly, have not gone that direction yet, strictly for the fact that the jump seemed quite large and the timing never seemed quite right. They wanted to get buy-in from their organization top down. OpenShift and OpenShift Vert is going to let you do that by having all the same, for the most part, features you would get of a normal virtualization platform, but seen through the lens of Kubernetes, where everything is going to be one for one the same in terms of how do we do CI and CD, in terms of how do we do network management, storage management, etc. Unifying your skill sets and building towards a future that will make you ultimately operate better. So as we drive through this, I want you guys as customers to be thinking about, what are we actually gaining from switching to another platform? Not just cost, not just replatforming, but unification, which is something we really hammer in on with OpenShift Vert, is that everything goes under the same platform, the same API, the same management interface, and you get all those features you're used to: guest virtual machine migration, support for Windows and Linux workloads alike, being able to bring in automation tools that maybe you've started traditionally using, like Ansible automation platform, and bringing those into an OpenShift context where everything can get managed simultaneously in the same way. So what does this look like from the actual architecture of OpenShift? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with OpenShift, OpenShift has 3 different what we call control plane nodes that are responsible for scheduling the different workloads into the environment and bringing out an API endpoint that lets you manage all of your workloads independently. Then every worker node in the environment is going to be running that Kubernetes kubelet, which essentially is a single process on a node that allows it to kickstart containers in the form of Kubernetes pods, or daemon sets for being able to manage the life cycles of things like, in this case, virtual machines running on those given machines, those virtual machines being KVM based. In this instance, you're actually going to be able to see pods and virtual machines running on the same nodes, quite likely next to each other, using the same DNS and networking backends, the same storage backends, to be able to contribute all the same functionality. Think of this as opening the door as a stepping stone to go from traditional virtual machines into a world that's going to allow you to seamlessly transition as you progress into the future into a more fundamental container-based workload. That being said, when it comes to retooling, yeah, there's going to still be a retooling phase. If you're looking to go strictly from VMware and you've never messed with OpenShift, there are some new tools that you will likely have to adopt. For example, it's highly recommended that you start looking to things like OpenShift GitOps, which is the open source project Argo CD for doing continuous delivery, bringing in a open source native storage solution into the platform, like OpenShift Data Foundations, to do things like management of storage on different types of devices. But making these migrated changes is going to essentially be a one-time adoption, because you are now getting the ability to manage, again, all of those things into the same lens. The way you bring in VM images, they're going to be hosted in a repository in the same way you would container images. The way you do CI is going to get unified, whether you use Tecton from Red Hat or you go down the rabbit hole of using GitLab CI with your platform. You're opening that door to make things very simplistic in a software-defined data center way. And the big thing here of going this direction is the efficiency gains you make. Now, a lot of people talk about that in theory, but the reality is traditional virtualization, and I'm sure if we polled the audience, which we won't right now, but if we polled people in general, most of our customers that are in a general virtualization platform are still using traditional configuration management, meaning they aren't operating in an ephemeral manner. They're making micro changes to existing machines. They don't have a way of state locking things. So if someone breaks something, they have to go back and rework, what did we change and when did we change it? Where in an OpenShift context, everything is ephemeral in nature from the way things are designed. We're creating literal images for everything and being able to swap and replace them out. That lets us not only be iterative, but also be, I don't want to use the word risky, but more or less risk averse, because we're able to push changes out into an environment. And in the event that change didn't quite work the way we expected, it's simple and easy to roll back to the previous iteration of what we had. This increases efficiency massively and lets us scale rapidly in ways that are not possible on traditional virtualization stacks. So once you decide that, hey, maybe we will consider doing this, I'm going to hammer back and again and say, most of our customers that are starting to approach this, which there's been many customers we've interviewed, they're starting to go down this migration path, and they're considering, should we migrate everything or should we migrate a portion of our workloads? In theory, you could migrate everything if you wanted to, but because of that, retooling, reskilling, many times we go, don't treat this like it's a rip and replacement for what you have. If you do that, you're setting yourself up to have much more complications in the short term. What we usually talk to customers is like, think of this of like the Elastic and Splunk play, where when customers first started adopting Elastic, they would bring it in strictly for the manner of augmenting what was going into Splunk, not only to save costs, but become more open source friendly and become more highly scalable. The same goes here. Let's bring in some of those workloads naturally from the beginning, and then start transitioning more and more as time goes on and we get more comfortable with our reskilled and retools. In the case of OpenShift, it comes with a migration toolkit that can plug into VMware for obviously those who are on VMware. It can plug directly into Rev for those who are Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization customers of the past. It can plug into OpenStack. There's a lot of different plugins available for you, and it will allow you to quickly migrate your machines from their existing environment over to the new one, which again, that's great for the virtual machines, but we still need to be thinking about the tooling and the skill set gap changes that we're going to have to make up for. That's just the beginning of it. That's day one. Once we get to day two, that's when we're going to start to re-automate things. And this is where Shadowsoft and Red Hat in combination can really come in to set you up for success in helping you take your old tool stack and your old methodology of how you used to do things and start to modernize and think of, how do we operate in a software-defined data center way? How do we bring some of these new toolings in and make it so whatever we set up for our virtualization workloads on OpenShift will marry up to what we're doing inside of our containerized workloads. Now, as I do this, there's always considerations you got to make when making a migration, no matter what platform you would be switching to. These obviously have certain ones that obviously play to OpenShift, but in general, these are things you should be thinking about. When getting off vSphere, first of all, if you're using vSphere fault tolerance, which I would say is a very small subset of customers because it requires very specific hardware, very specific software constraints, etc. There is no equivalent for vSphere fault tolerance on any platform outside of VMware. So if you're looking for that kind of capability or that specifically feature, For a particular subset of workloads, maybe those workloads are ones that stay on the platform until such a time they get modernized to be more distributed in nature and not require that type of a feature. The second thing being network topology and IP address management. And what I'm talking about is, if you think about it just as two different data centers, your VMware data center and your alternative, in this case, OpenShift Virt, you're going to have routing in your environment set up one way or another, right? You might have your routing traditionally send all of your traffic to this VMware environment of old. Well, now as you're moving your virtual machines over, IP addresses are going to have to change likely because the routing structure of your organization from a networking perspective will be different. And that might also get a little complicated as you're migrating partial workloads over. So you really need to be cognizant in your planning stage of what are the IP segments of our current applications and workloads living in VMware that we're targeting bringing over so we know what has to change. The third thing is workload downtime. Now, in general, there's not really a big requirement for workload downtime, with one caveat. OpenShift with the migration toolkit can live migrate VMs out of VMware and other platforms, with one exception. Before it allows the migration to fully complete, in other words, get that last inch of a mile, it's going to require you to shut off the original VM workloads so it can make sure it gets all the last bits of that state brought over. That way we don't have a virtual machine that ends up on the other side of the connection that is, from hours prior to the last one being shut down, and you end up in kind of a weird state with two machines representing the same workloads with different data inside of them. The fourth thing, and again, this goes back to what I said earlier, is augmenting or fully replacing. If you go to augment, you might have some more network things to be thinking about, some storage things you need to be thinking about as you're bringing things over, but you're going to have that benefit of being able to, crawl, walk, run, so to speak, into this environment. I will say this at this time, though. I think it's imperative that that's the way it be considered rather than full migrations. Or for some customers, they might go, this seems like a lot. I'm not going to go that way. If you don't capitalize now, remember what Ross talked about before, which is 20% of organizations are likely going to move off of VMware or start their process in this year alone. If you're not getting in the same way and going in the same direction, you're likely to fall behind. So this isn't just an opportunity for change, but not capitalizing on that opportunity, whether full or partial migration, is an opportunity to fall behind. The last piece being storage operates differently. When you're going to move workloads over, many customers are used to, I have a fiber channel hooked up to all my VMs and I can live migrate VMs without a problem. You can totally live migrate VMs in OpenShift as it relates today. However, there was a specific requirement that the backing storage be read-write many based rather than read-write once based. This means you're likely going to want a software-defined storage solution like OpenShift Data Foundations to make it possible for you to have seamless transitions during maintenance windows and node outages in case that ever does occur. There's a ton of ecosystem partners that play into this. So I did mention OpenShift Data Foundations. There's other storage providers that are also at play for the pure customers. There's Portworx, which provides a partnered, tightly governed software-defined storage solution for OpenShift as well. You can use plugins that talk directly to your old storage provider without having a software-defined storage layer, like the Trident plugin, etc. But there are caveats there where you start to miss out features like software-defined storage replication, file system access from a read-write many perspective. So this is where we would come into play to help you figure out what's the right solution for you based on your workload requirements. In that same vein, backup and recovery is going to change a little bit. You might be used to a solution like Commvault filling in the space. Most solutions that do backup and recovery have been designed for OpenShift from the ground up, and so they operate quite a bit differently. Red Hat does provide the OpenShift data protection API to be able to do some of that capability based on a project from Valero. Outside of that, there's other enterprise solutions that are out there that are one-offs. Again, if you're using Portworx, you have PX Backup, and there's some other solutions in the space as well, like Valero, Directly, etc. As we go on, we're going to have new monitoring solutions, many of which can carry over because they've been building out. If you are, for example, a Dynatrace customer, all of those things will transfer over. It's just a different plugin installation, actually making your life easier because it's a one-drop install inside of the OpenShift cluster, in which case everything gets instrumented. So some other things to be thinking about is, do the tools you have today marry up? Do they have something that's Kubernetes / OpenShift native, or do we need to go find something alternative that works for the future that's going to operate for our virtual machines and our container workloads alike? And with that, it's time for that roundtable discussion. Ross.
Yes, thanks, Derek. So we'll start the discussion off with a couple of questions, but to the audience, if there are any questions you want to ask the panelists here, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A box. Steve, let's go to you first. How are you seeing customers approaching this problem?
Then nice to talk to you guys. I appreciate the question, Ross. So when it comes to the customers that we're talking to every day, I would say I can't. I don't want to dumb down the fact that, you know, a lot of people say all of our customers are having this conversation, when in reality it's just a handful of people. We're literally having this conversation multiple times a day with nearly all of our clients. And so the fact that many of you on this call are also asking the same question, I just want to assure you, you're in the same boat as everyone else. I don't know a whole lot of people that have made decisions and started making moves, but I will say that the approach that people are taking is getting ahead of it, and I think that's the most important thing. A lot of people are looking 12 to 18 months out and trying to make decisions around a VMware renewal that they have coming up in 2026. To give themselves enough time to look at alternatives, to look at all you know, the challenges they may run into around adoption, around training their internal organization, around some of the feature sets that may be missing, and what alternatives they're going to have to look at around that. And so I would say that early is best. I've had a couple customers recently that have brought up, "Hey, I got a renewal coming up in 3 months. Like, what should we do?" And the real answer is, you got to renew and then start looking at something down the road. I mean, that's just the hard truth, depending on how big your environment is, but in most cases. But, you know, I think it can very much seem overwhelming as well, because there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of FUD happening online as well, because people are trying to capitalize on this opportunity with, you know, a giant like VMware suddenly, you know, stumbling a little bit. And so when it comes to the conversations we're having and people accelerating in that journey, not to toot our own horn, but, you know, finding partners that have experience in this space, that have experience with multiple solutions, and understanding like what the landscape looks like out there can help you from a bigger picture perspective. I think a lot of us want to do our own research, and that's absolutely, you know, worth it, and you should be doing your own research, but having a guide, so to speak, to help walk you up that mountain is certainly helpful. And so I would suggest anyone on this call, obviously we're here to help, but if you have those people that are working with external organizations or multiple organizations and have a bigger picture of what the world looks like, I would highly recommend it.
Thanks, Steve. And Christian, how about you? Do you want to take that question as well? How are you seeing customers approach this? What are you advocating for?
Yeah, certainly. You know, it is a challenge, right? A challenge that many organizations are facing today, and it seems like it's something that many organizations were already thinking about doing, but the time is now much closer than they thought before, right? That a lot of organizations were thinking about transforming their infrastructure already. They were already planning to do that eventually, right? They thought they had more time, but because of these changes, now everybody is trying to find a solution fast. It is a challenge in many ways, right? It's a challenge from the organization in the cultural perspective, in the process perspective, right? because everything has to change, has to transform in a new way of doing things. As a system administrator, you've been maintaining your environment with VMs in a way that you're used to, right? With a tool and platform that you're used to maintaining it. But now you are having to think about, okay, now I have to think about potentially containers, right? And I've never used containers. So how is that going to look like? How is that going to work? So I think that organizations are approaching this in a very strategic way. They're coming to partners, they're coming to us with questions, with questions about how can we implement this in a way that is going to be easy or easier, right, for the whole organization to be part of. Another challenge is that this is not just one group within the organization that is being faced with this. It's not just the system administrators, right, managing VMware or virtualization. Um, there's other groups around it, and whether it's developers, right, that are being affected by these changes as well, database administrators, storage administrators, all these or groups within the organization have been affected by it. So I think, it's important to have definitely a partner on your side to be able to help you and walk you through that process, how that looks like. And it's all about, just really understanding that transformation. The transformation is not just a technology piece.
So expand on that a little bit more, Christian. I know when we've talked offline, you're an advocate for this digital transformation. I mean, what does it really take?
Yeah, I am passionate about that conversation because I'm a very strategic thinker, right? I don't tend to specialize in one thing. I love how everything interconnects and works well together. So we hear this term digital transformation, and many of us may be tired of that. I hear it so much, but what does that even mean? What's digital transformation? Well, if we think about the actual wording, right, is the integration of technology, of digital technology in every area of the business. And so as a business, as an organization, you have to fundamentally change the way you are operating today and the way you add value to your internal customers and your external customers. Because if you think about the digital leaders of today, right, those organizations that were born in a digital era, like Tesla, Airbnb, and all those other organizations that were born in a digital era, you can see that they are digital leaders because they are able to scale fast. They're able to provide, services much quicker and faster to their customers because they have already transformed. They already were born in this digital era. They're using microservices, they're using containers, they're using all this modern infrastructure to be able to support the demands of their customers. So what's interesting, and I'll tell you a story really quick here. Many organizations are thinking about digital transformation, and many are thinking just technology, right? I love soccer, so I play soccer, and I needed some shoes. So I went to my local store to buy some shoes here, and I went to the store. They didn't have them, so they told me, "Hey, you can go online now, and you can buy them online." I'm like, "Oh, fantastic!" I don't know about you, but anytime I need something online, I'll go to Amazon because it's so easy, right? I can just go there, order whatever I need. The app works great. I get what I need very fast. Well, this time, this organization is trying to compete with the likes of Amazon and Dick's Sporting Goods and all these other organizations that are sporting goods. Well, I go online, I order my shoes, and to my surprise, and I believe I show you the picture, Ross, of what I received. Unfortunately, I received 2 shoes of the right foot, and there were 2 different sizes as well. And the box that I got was beat up and opened. And I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? So that was a great example for an organization that is trying to compete, that is thinking about digital transformation from the perspective of technology alone. But they forgot about 2 pieces that are so important in this transformation: people and process. If they would have implemented a process in place with this transformation, I would have received what I order. I would have been satisfied with my order, with my whole experience with this company, right? But because that process was not in place, that was not the case. I'm honestly, I don't think I'm going to be ever buying from that store again, because I want to get what I receive, what I order, right? And then people, right? The whole cultural transformation, it's so important as well. So when it comes to digital transformation, we can't forget that it's people, process, and technology. Yes, you can buy new technology, but if you're not thinking about competing in this digital era and stay relevant, right, and be ready for the future, you could change to a different technology, you know, that like Derek said, a technology that is pretty much the same as what you already have, but it's not setting you up for the future. So it's very important to start thinking about that. You know, if we're already going through this challenge, through this transformation, why don't we do it in a way that is going to prepare us for the future? A future-proof platform that's going to allow us to grow, and gradually. You don't have to completely transform, like Derek said, right? You can do it gradually. You can move VMs, right? In OpenShift virtualization in this case, right? But also alongside start transforming all the other applications in a more modern way.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And speaking of the future, I'll direct this to Derek. What's at stake in your mind, Derek?
There's a couple of things. So I'm going to answer that, and I'm going to answer it with also addressing something that I said that I thought Christian mentioned that I think is really, really, really important that we bring into this, because I didn't think about it until he said it to verbalize it. So what's at stake? And I said the phrase briefly earlier, is the opportunity to be left behind. I think everyone's looking at this as an opportunity to get off VMware, but I see this as, if you don't get off VMware, or if you don't start the process of getting off VMware and going to a containerized platform, you will be left behind by the people that decide to do so right now. We know for a fact there's never been a time before now. There's not been a time that people in this big of groupings have wanted to get off VMware all at the same time. Prior to this, it was, hey, you know, we're considering containers, we're considering the cloud, because, you know, like, we just want to do things a little different. And it was, you know, individualistic. This is a group effort across the entire globe. Everyone is looking at this at the same time. And what happens when everybody looks at things at the same time? A certain chunk are going to go. Forrester says it's 20%. It's funny because we had a conversation, you and I, Ross, a few days ago, and I, finger in the wind, said 20%. I mean, the fact that Forrester actually has quantified that based on talking to people, I think is pretty that it's paramount to be thinking about, because let's say, and this is public information for those who are unaware, Chick-fil-A, for example, switched to Kubernetes for their stores 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a long time they've had it in their stores. If you go look at all their competitors, they're all just trying to get on Kubernetes now for their stores. But who has the best experience when you go to the drive-thru? And who has the best experience when you've seen that customer experience? That is driven first by their technology platform. In order to be able to iterate of that quickly, they started earlier. So now if you don't get on the bus right now, and everybody else that's your competitors, 20% of your competitors even, that are considering this, they get on the bus, that 20% is going to outpace you strictly because they did the work now. And now I want to double click on that to say, though, Christian mentioned earlier, people ask the question, and this is 100% true. I want to make this transition easy. I just want to say this quite frankly, straight out. If you want the easy way to making this work, the only way is to work with people who've done it before, which is through consultants. And it's still going to be a challenge. If you want to, you know, lose weight in the gym, for example, it's hard work. If anything that you have to ever do in life requires effort. And this is a big change that opens a lot of possibilities for what your future can be. And if you're looking for the easy way out, you're looking to maintain status quo, which means you're not going to move. And you will be one of the people that gets outpaced by 20%. And I'll close that by saying, JJ Watt said it best. Success is leased and the rent is due every day.
All right, thanks, Derek. It looks like we got a question in the panel. I know we responded via chat, but Steve or Derek, do you want to take this so that the broader audience can hear the response? The question is, how does the Red Hat license work for OpenShift?
Yeah, I responded in the chat, but just verbally so everyone's aware. And it can be confusing if you haven't been in this world before. The way Red Hat's subscription model works is a yearly subscription. Yes, you can buy in 3-year subscription blocks, but you are charged per core or virtual core or socket pair if you're on, obviously bare metal with virtualization to a certain degree, for the virtual, the worker nodes that are going to run your virtual machines or your containers or your containers. You will not be charged for, though, the other nodes that run control plane level services. So the API endpoint, the subscription, you will obviously still need to provide hardware for that, but you will only be charged for the core count of the machines that are going to run your actual workloads.
All right. Thanks, Derek.
And just to add to that, so sorry if you don't mind, one thing that is really interesting and important to mention, if you have a lot of rail servers, right, operating systems, you can run them in OpenShift Virtualization, and that's part of it. That's included, right? So
you don't have to license the rails separately. Yeah.
That's right.
Good point.
Yeah, so just to add to this, one thing that I'm seeing from a lot of customers too, and I think probably all of us on this call have been seeing, is to Christian's earlier point, a lot of organizations have been thinking about making this transformation for a while, but obviously you have a day job and you have things that are happening. You're putting out fires already, and so the time when you've started to look into it, you realized the time for your team just wasn't there. Or maybe it was a financial thing. You're looking to your leadership for funding to make this happen. And then when they start looking at the cost of, all right, so this is going to add to some of our costs. We already have all these tools that we're using, and you want to add a cost to like making this transformation. We just don't have in the budget this year. And so one of the things, as we're talking about subscriptions and we're talking about the cost of this, is I'm finding these people that maybe already had this like strategic, innovative, forward-thinking mindset already, where they want to make this change, but they keep getting turned down or have been turned down in the past. They're leveraging this opportunity to go back to leadership and say, hey, there is now a big push for us to at least consider this. So let's talk about what this change is actually going to cost now that you're factoring in this price increase, and now you're factoring in the loss of competitiveness in the market. And they're using that to sell this to leadership. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because when we start looking at subscriptions, it's very easy just to go, okay, what's the MSRP for 15 subscriptions? And sometimes it's not quite that easy to sell to your upper management and to your CFO. And so we have capabilities working with Red Hat to work through actually like putting a number to the ROI that this looks like, and creating like a business case for why this makes sense. Because I think when it comes to Kubernetes and transformation in general, it's hard to like just look at the numbers and you start analyzing, okay, this is going to be the overall cost, but how is this actually going to benefit our company? And a lot of it's hypothetical. If you look at it from the outside of like, okay, so it's going to speed up my development process. It's going to help me deliver a better customer experience. Like, okay, how much? Give me a dollar amount. And it's hard to like quantify that. And so we have some tools, and we've been working, Red Hat and Shadowsoft has been working with some external companies as well, and developing a model so that we can help you build a business use case or build business case to go back to upper management and say, hey, I finally have the answers you're looking for, and I can start to quantify some of this. And now factoring in the fact that we have this pressing need to look at alternatives, this makes a much better case to take back to management.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. So speaking of that, I'm going to take the next slide here back from you, Derek. We want to try and make it easy to take the next step. So if the information today has been interesting or it's piqued your interest, let's start a conversation and a collaboration. I think what we've really learnt with working with our customers around this particular problem is it's going to take a collaboration to really understand what's important to your company, what do your workloads look like, and what options might make sense, and then trying to build that business case, to Steve's point, with a POC or a proof of value or something similar. So we've got links included in this Bright Talk platform where you can find some more information about OpenShift Virtualization, find some more information around Shadowsoft and how to reach us. So we'd welcome a conversation if you're intrigued by this particular problem and how we're looking to solve it for, and we are solving it for customers. So on that note, to the panelists, thank you. Any final comments, or anyone want to wrap us up for us?
I think I'm good. Thanks everyone for coming today. We really enjoyed this conversation. We hope you guys enjoyed hearing what we had to say. And if you, again, have any questions or considerations, things you want to run by us at DearWise, we're always open-minded, and we'd love to hear some feedback from you guys.
Yeah, I second that as well. I appreciate everyone's time. And yeah, like I said earlier, I just encourage you to start early and to work with someone you trust. And we'd love to be that partner for you if you're beginning this journey. Just know that you're at the same pace that a lot of other people are, but we're starting to figure a lot of things out along the way. And so we'd love to walk with you on that journey as you're trying to look at this next step and what your decisions are going to be.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really bad with sayings, but I believe it goes, how do you eat an elephant? But one bite at a time, right? So well, it can seem like a big elephant here that you need to eat. So I want to encourage you, just take that first step. It might be a little bit easier than when you think, especially when you have partners alongside to help you with this walk.
I love that, Christian. We'll all have a slice of elephant for dinner, huh? All right. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Derek. And thanks for tuning in. Until next time.